Joining me now on Fight Bananas is Coach Adam Copley of War Training Center. And Coach, it's nice to have you on the show for the first time. A lot to get to, a lot I want to ask you. But first, I want to start with the result of that Zach Reese fight this past weekend. I know it's not what you want, and a lot of people are upset at obviously the back of the head shots, the illegal shots. What's the status of the appeal right now? I know that's something that you're looking into.
His management has already started the appeal process. I know that can take some time. I've had a couple appeals in the past, and we've won every appeal we've ever done, and I'm hopeful and confident this will be the same.
Yeah, and those were some brutal shots, man. You showed me the actual pictures of the back of the head afterwards. How's he doing? How's he feeling?
He's doing all right. I know they're going to send him for a scan here in the next week or two anyways, just to be cautious, but he's doing pretty good. He does have some marks on the back of the head, though, that are pretty significant.
Did he get a concussion?
So they did not put him in concussion protocol. They kept him for 30 minutes, did all the checks, and they said he was good to go.
Okay. I would assume that there would have to be some kind of medical suspension, right? Wait, is that something they're still
Yes.
trying to figure
So,
out?
so anytime they rule a KO or a TKO, there's an automatic suspension. I believe it's like 45 or 60 days in California. So no contact for the next month and a half at least, no sparring. But yeah, he'll get the follow-up checks done as well to make sure everything's good to go.
Just what was your take on how all that played out? Obviously, I mean, I guess I don't know. I guess from a coach's point of view, you'd have the better angle than I. But did you feel like those were blatant shots, or is it just kind of like happenstance, or is just you're in the mix, you're trying to finish the fight?
Man, I can't speak on the mindset of his opponent. I'm just guessing. But I don't think they were blatant. I will say the very first shot that he threw, Zach was framing him. And with this frame, it really only exposed the back of his head. That's the only place you could get a clean shot because he was posted up on his right arm and he was framing the neck and head area with his left arm. And the guy grabbed his head with his left hand. And then while holding his head with his left hand, threw the other shot to the back of the head with the right hand. Now, was he purposely aiming for the back of the head? I don't know. He was just throwing looping shots possibly as well. But I mean, he was holding the head with one hand and it went directly to the back of the head with the other. And that's the first one that actually had any kind of damage or effect on Zach Reese in that moment. Like before that, any shots weren't really flush or clean, and they didn't seem to have any kind of effect on damage. But that one definitely rocked him. And then the follow-up shots after that, there was two more to the back of the head in addition to some other ones.
And with Zach having some good momentum in his career right now, I mean, it's got to be really devastating from a mental aspect for him. Obviously, he wants to pick up as many wins as he can in a row. When you lose like that, even if it is turned to a no contest, like from a fighter's point of view, like where's his head at right now as far as like his where he's at in the UFC and just his career?
Yeah, obviously we have big goals for him, and so does he for himself. And this kind of sets that back because even if it becomes a no contest, which I think it will, it puts him back. It's not a win. A win helps him climb in the division. A win helps him get two paychecks as well, which helps him career wise. And the more money these guys have in their bank accounts, the more they can put into the training, and the more security they can have, and more time they can dedicate to training. So yeah, it definitely affects it. We had a goal to get 3 or 4 wins in this year for Zach, and now we're not going to even fight for probably a couple months, right, with the suspension and things like that. And yeah, it just leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Whether we get the no contest or not, it's not a positive feeling afterwards.
Yeah, well said. The original opponent was Dumas. Obviously, that fell through, and he got Bekoff instead. How different of a fight was it that he got in Bekoff versus preparing for Dumas?
Oh man, it's significantly different, right? Cedricus Dumas is primarily a striker. He's long and tall like Zach. We brought in bodies to simulate him that had similar style and build. And then here we are on a Monday of fight week, and we get a 5'10", 5'11" tank of a wrestler, Russian wrestler, and it's just a completely different game plan, right? We went from a guy who's probably going to stand with us and might come in for some body locks if he gets hurt to a guy now where I think we have a significant striking advantage, but he's got a lot of power and he's going to just try to force the grappling. And so it is a different kind of game plan where we went from maybe being more offensive in our grappling to more counter grappling. But I mean, I did the film. We talked about it. We went over it. We know he's going to shoot in early and try to get it to the ground. We knew that there was a possibility we could get the submission in the transition or in the guard. Zach Reese has a great guard game. But yeah, I think he was working his way back up to the feet. He'd gone for a couple subs, and we got a little space when that happened, and he created the frame and started to build up, and it just those back of the head shots were the game changer. I'm still confident that if it wasn't for the back of the head shots, Zach would have had a great fight and pulled out the victory, you know. But that's why they're illegal. Those things are game changing. They can cause serious damage. It can shut your lights out.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It was kind of scary seeing him afterwards, and he's such a big, imposing guy. When you see someone that's just that big and strong, it even adds to that scariness of it. For you as a coach, obviously having a relationship with your fighters like that, how difficult is it for you, just when you're worried about their health and well-being?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime there's something like that in a fight, number one concern isn't anything career wise. It's always for their health. And until they didn't let me in right away, there the inspector was trying to say let one coach in, and it took a little while before that happened. They were basically about to announce it. But once I talked to him, he said he was good. He didn't he was a little wobbly when he first got to his feet, but he said after that he was good. He had full recollection of everything, and he was just frustrated with the way it ended, frustrated that the back of the head shots were there, and it became on that night the call was that a TKO or KO loss. So and all the things that it does to delay his career. I don't think it changes his career path, but it definitely postpones it.
How was LA and just that venue as a whole? It looked absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it's my first time in that stadium. Anytime we've been to the LA area in the past, it's really been at like the Honda Center or in Anaheim. And this is my first time into Inglewood and in the new stadium there. And it was beautiful, man. I really enjoyed it. And LA was a pretty good city considering everything that's happened there recently. I didn't see any damage from the fires or anything, any smoke or any craziness going on, more than the normal craziness that LA has going on. So that was a relief as well. It seems back to normal there,
Yeah, that's good to hear.
as
Uh,
normal as LA is.
yeah, fair enough. Fighting in the Apex versus, fighting in these packed arenas with screaming fans. What do you prefer? And can you talk about the benefits of maybe fighting in the Apex from a coach's perspective?
I prefer the Apex. Obviously, you had an inkling to that already. Yeah, for a coach's perspective, I think it's better because obviously we can hear the other corner, we can hear the fighters better, they can hear us. So it makes it more like just skill versus skill. I feel like when they're in the crowd, the arena can get really loud. It makes it difficult to hear your coaching staff. It also might push your adrenaline a little higher. You might be a little more aggressive than you typically would be. In the Apex, it's easier to reel our guys in. And I know Zach prefers to fight in front of crowds, though. He wants the big crowds. But personally, if we had all of our fights in the Apex, I'd be okay with that. It is a cool feeling to walk out and have, 4 or 5 sections high of just screaming fans cheering you on, and it's a different kind of energy. And I know the victory is that much better when you have thousands and thousands of fans cheering you on. But from a coaching perspective, it's just like being in the gym with a sparring day and some people watching when
Yeah,
we're in the Apex.
that's kind of what I figured you might say. How often do you hear like real nasty stuff, like walking back? Like if you're in a big arena with screaming fans, like and maybe you beat the hometown guy or you lose or whatever it is, like how often are you hearing that stuff that maybe you don't want to hear on a national broadcast?
Typically you don't hear a lot of negativity from the fans in the venue there. They're usually pretty positive on the way out. It's online where you can get a lot of hate from the fans. And I think that's the case for people in person too, right? There might be people that talk a lot of trash and are haters, but they're not typically going to be that way in person. And it stays that way even in the crowd.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm not a hater. I'm not one to talk junk. But hypothetically speaking, if I was and I saw someone the size of Zach Reese in person, I think I keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, but it's a thing with professional sports, right? You got football players out that are out there like 6'7" running 4.3 40s, and you got people talking trash to them that would never say it to their face.
Yeah.
So it's in all professional sports. It just comes with it.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. As far as your career goes, I mean, you fought as well. What was that transition like from a fighter to a coach? How easy was that for you?
Uh, I'm a much better coach than I was fighter. I'll say that. Most of my skill development and technique was just years in the process, and learning from all these different great coaches and talents I had around me, and pulling what works and what doesn't work from each individual sport. But yeah, I was a guy who owned a gym back in the day, and At one point I ended up coaching over at 4 ounce with Jeremy, and now Jeremy opened up War Training Center, and I followed him over there, and we've been having a great run ever since, man. But I'm glad I fought. I had a few amateur unsanctioned bouts, smokers and stuff, and then I had two professional fights. And between the weight cuts and the experience of fighting and fighting in front of arena, like it's definitely something I can pull from. But I'm also glad that I made the mistakes on my own career so I can correct them for my guys going forward on theirs.
What gives you the most joy as a coach? Is there something in particular that, really makes everything you do worth it every day to wake up and go through the grind?
Uh, I'll say this. The best moments for me is when those guys get the call to a big organization, because it's really hard coming up on the amateur and the regional scene. Even the pros on the regional scene, they're losing money, right? I mean, they're sacrificing work and time and travel and, all their supplements and all their costs that come along with camp. And it's a long, hard road to get that call. And when they get that call, it doesn't mean they made it, right? You don't make it in your first contract. You got to get to a couple of contracts before you start making good money. But it's just they can live off of their work then at that point, right? They can make a living at that point, and it's really rewarding. So that getting that call initially is amazing, and like Contender Series wins, those are amazing too.
What's the
Same thing.
hardest part of being a coach?
Hardest part is those tough losses, man. And whether it's a amateur regional loss or a professional in the UFC or PFL, like all the losses hit hard. Yeah, I correlate it to like a Super Bowl. Every time you win an MMA fight, it's like you won the Super Bowl. That's the feelings you get along with it, the emotions. But every time you lose, it's also like you just lost the Super Bowl. So that's the downside.
Who's your football team? Do you have one?
Houston Texans. I'm a Houston fan, man. All sports.
Okay. CJ Stroud, you sold on him for the long term?
I am, man. We just got to get an O-line in front of him. But yeah, CJ Stroud's great. Great character, great quarterback.
Nico Collins is the man too. You guys have a good duo right there.
He is. We got a great young team. It's on our football team, and our basketball is doing really good this year too. Great young players, and I think with a little more development, they'll be at the top of the league.
As far as fighter pay goes, what's your thoughts on that? And do you think it's going to change maybe for the better here moving forward as the sport continues to evolve?
Yeah, I think it will. I think if you look back 10 years ago, it's already changed exponentially. And I think that'll continue as well. So obviously I want the guys to get paid more, because if they get paid more, then so do I. But that just comes from, in this sport, if you want to get paid, all you got to do is win. If you keep winning, you'll keep getting paid. It's as simple as that. Win at least 2 out of every 3, and don't be boring, and you're going to continue to get paid in this sport. But yeah, I want them to get paid more. But you hear the guys talking like Chell about how he made like a couple grand for a title fight. What was that, 10 or 15 years ago? I mean, there's guys on their entry level contract making significantly more than that now. So obviously the pay has already increased, and I think that'll continue as the sport grows.
Yeah. Something that was really disappointing to see, I wanted to get your take on it, is the closing of the Bellator banner. PFL decided not to continue with that. That was really disheartening for me. I enjoy Bellator a lot. What's your thoughts on that? And just, I guess those second tier promotions now, right? Because it's the UFC, that's the top dog, and then there's everyone else. It seems like PFL is in that number 2 spot. So just your thoughts on that as a whole.
Man, it's unfortunate to see. Bellator had a great run, but also I think all of us saw this coming for the last 5 to 10 years. I know I had a fighter fighting for Bellator. He won the last couple fights on his contract. They didn't re-sign him, and that was because they were planning to sell to PFL, and they said they weren't doing any re-signings at that moment. And with Bellator closing, there's a lot of these fighters that were sitting on the shelf. And hopefully now they can get signed to these other organizations and get active again. I wouldn't be surprised if Patchy and Archie and Patricio and a lot of these other end up coming over to the UFC or, some of these other organizations. Not to mention there's some, international organizations like ONE and KSW that also have, pretty good paychecks. So the UFC is not the only option there. But I assume a lot of those guys towards the top of the divisions will make the transfer over to the UFC and sign with them.
I'm just assuming based on a lot of the interviews that I've done over the years, but when you have a young up and comer, someone that has the potential to make it to, the highest of levels, they always want to get to the UFC. And that makes sense because again, it's the biggest promotion in the world. That's where all the eyeballs are on, mostly. but maybe they're not ready for that yet. Maybe they'd be better served to fight in Bellator or PFL to get more wins, to get more experience before they get to the UFC. How difficult is that for you as a coach to kind of guide them in the right direction so they can have a successful long career?
You know, I think the key is holding them off from going pro. A lot of my amateurs, they're getting 6, 7 fights as an amateur before they go pro. And I have a couple requirements like winning 2 titles, or winning a title and defending it, or, having certain rankings and experience levels. Because by the time you go pro, it's a quick path nowadays, especially with Contender Series. You could be 5-0 and getting a call to Contenders and being in the UFC, and that could be a year and a half into your pro career. So I think by the time you go pro, you got to be ready to beat guys in the UFC already. And by the time you get to the UFC, you never know who your first draw is. It could be a guy that's going to end up being ranked in a year or a year and a half. So you have to be ready to beat ranked guys by the time you get that call. So it's just being patient on the early end of your career is very important. But as for what's the path, I have a guy, Anthony Ivy, who's with PFL, and they're paying pretty good. They paid an entry-level contract that was very comparable or maybe slightly better than the UFC entry-level contract is. And he has a chance at that time to possibly get in a tournament and win a lot more money, So it just depends what you want in your career. I will say this. I think the best competitors in the world are in the UFC, but there's some guys in PFL that would do quite well over there, just like there's some guys in Bellator that will do really well in the UFC too. So it's not always the case. There's those exceptions to the rule, and you just got to figure out what works for you.
I wanted to ask about some of your fighters too. You mentioned Anthony Ivy, so let's talk about him and Dimitri. When do you think we can maybe see them fight next? Is there like a time frame where you think they can fight?
I probably shouldn't be answering these questions, but I don't know. That's a question I'd like to get answered too. Anthony Ivy still has a couple of fights on his PFL deal. And I hope if they don't get him a fight and get him in the tournament, which, sounds like they're shrinking the tournament. They already cut the prize money in half. Cut him out of his contract and let the UFC sign him if they're willing to do that. He's on a 7-fight win streak. All of them finishes. He's 15-7 overall. He's undefeated since he switched to our gym. He was on a 5-fight losing streak, and really he just needed a little guidance and some other training partners that are around his weight class, and he's got that now. And I think he's one of the best welterweights on the planet. I know a lot of guys will think I'm crazy for saying that, but they haven't seen him and trained with him in the last couple of years. He's definitely leveled up and he's in his prime, and I want him fighting in his prime. He's a guy who wants to fight 5 or 6 times a year, and we're struggling to do that. He's 2-0 in the PFL banner, and hopefully they can get him active this year. But if not, I'd love him to go to the UFC and fight there.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what's next for him. I was fortunate enough to interview him. Oh, geez, it's been maybe a year now is the last time I spoke to him, but great guy. And you can clearly see he's turned a corner. It seems like maybe since
Absolutely.
coming to your gym.
Yeah. Incredible, man. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes these guys just need a change in pace or someone to, I feel like a lot of guys in days there, all they need is someone to put all the pieces together. Anthony Ivy came over and he was already really talented. Yes, we expanded his striking and his wrestling a little bit, but he was already good everywhere. He was great in jiu-jitsu, but he was decent in wrestling and striking already and a phenomenal athlete. But he just needed the MMA side to put it together. You got a lot of guys who are cornering that are gi jiu-jitsu coaches or they're a boxing coach, but in all honesty, like the mechanics and the skills are different for MMA. I think someone like him just needed someone that was an MMA mindset and base as a coach and to put the tools together specifically for the sport. And then on top of that, having a bunch of welterweights in the training room like Trevin Giles and Alex Morono, and having Zach Reese there and some of these other bodies, it's good to have bodies that will expose any holes that you have in your game every day, so it's easier to fix them in the training room before you get into the fight.
Yeah. Excited to see again him back in wherever that is, whatever promotion it is, whatever the time frame is. Big fan of Aquaman. Let me ask you about Dimitri as well. Huge win over Lucas Brennan his last time out. What was your overall takeaway of that performance and his trajectory?
Oh man, I think Dimitri's incredible and super talented. He's just had a lot of personal stuff going on in his life right now, so I haven't been seeing him in the training room much, but I'm hoping this year he gets back consistent into the training room, and then we can take some fights. We had a couple opportunities later in the year last year, but he just wasn't in camp and wasn't training regularly enough at the level he wanted to be, so we couldn't take those on short notice. So hopefully he gets back in the training room more consistently, and we can just keep our ears open for whatever's next. But that was a huge win. Lucas Brennan has phenomenal talent. At that time, he was undefeated, and I knew Dimitri had the tools to beat him, and I believed in him. And And I'm glad he got it done, and I'm glad the judges got it right that night.
Yeah. And how old is he now?
Him and Ant are 34. They're twins, actually.
30. Okay, I didn't know that. They're twins.
Yeah, obviously not identical, right?
Yeah.
45 and 70, but yeah, they're twins.
Okay, very cool. Well, still plenty of time left. As far as Alex Morono and Trevin Giles go, how many more? I know it's tough to really forecast and look into the future, but how much longer do you think those two are going to be around fighting in the UFC?
I don't know. They've had a lot of fights. I think Trevin's had 14 or 15 fights in the UFC. I think Morano's had around 20. I'm sure they'll take it as long as they can. If you're getting those big paydays, why wouldn't you, right? Unless it starts, affecting your personal life and your health. But, both those guys are also really intelligent guys. They've done really good with their money and invested it. And I feel confident they can have a nice life after fighting, no matter what.
Yeah, I've never spoken with Trevin, but Alex came on a podcast that me and Ugly Man Joe used to do, and such a unbelievable MMA mind. Do you
Absolutely.
see him as like a really good coach when he's done fighting?
I do. He has not a huge fight team, but he has a really good fight team. Him and his guys come over and spar and cross train with us a couple days a week, and listening to him commentate for Fury, I'm sure you can hear like he's a very detailed guy, very intelligent, knows the MMA game, knows everyone on the scene. Like he's very involved, and I think he'll be either UFC commentator or one of these other bigger organizations one day too, because he's just so good at it and he has all the technical details and knows all the guys around. But yeah, he's a great coach, man. He's pumping out a lot of good regional pros that start off with him as amateurs. And obviously, he has Ricky Tercios. He had Jake Heffernan, who just retired but had a great career there. He's put out some names, and I think that'll continue to grow along with his team and his name as well. Like he's got some 45ers and 35ers on the regional scene that are coming up that just have a couple pro fights that are going to definitely be in the UFC one day. Very talented, and they have a lot of the same skills and a style that he has as well, which is fan friendly with a mixture of really solid grappling.
Do you guys ever exchange like coaching tips or pick one another's brains from a coaching perspective?
Constantly, and that's the case in the gym, right? We have so many guys that are experts in their own specific area. We have national champs in Greco and wrestling. We have D1 wrestlers. We have jiu-jitsu black belts with different styles. We have all these different striking backgrounds. So it's a common place in the training room for guys to exchange information, and that goes for me too. I learned from some of my guys on a weekly basis. I'm always learning new things from these guys that come from these specific backgrounds. So yeah, Alex is definitely one of them. We're always talking shop, and he's a guy I really enjoy doing that with.
Yeah, just imagine. To go back to Trevin Giles for a minute, he is on a 3-fight skid. Where's his mindset at right now, as far as like his confidence goes? Is it still really high? It's not like he's losing to chumps. He's in there fighting top-notch guys.
I mean, he's fighting tough prospect after tough prospect. He lost to Dricus Du Plessis, who's now the champ. He lost to Michael Morales, who's ranked in. He lost to Carlos Praetis, who's ranked in. Against Michael Morales, he had his moment early in the fight. Dropped him, almost had the submission. Against Carlos Pratis. He was winning the entire fight and barely getting touched until he got caught in the third round. And that's aged well. Look what those guys are doing to everyone else. He's just really fighting prospect after prospect. And I think that just shows the UFC knows, like, if you can beat Trevin Giles, you deserve to be fighting guys in the rankings because he's that skilled. But I do know Trevin's considering going back up to 85. And, he had a really good run at 85 before Du Plessis. And while those guys might have a little weight on him, he's still a strong guy, very athletic, and he has the speed on those guys at that level. He can outpace them. He can outspeed them there. So, yeah, we're definitely considering moving back to 85. We'll see what happens with that.
How heavy does he get?
205, 210. He doesn't get super heavy, but neither do any of my 85ers really. Well, except for one of my regional guys, Brego. He'll get really heavy. But yeah, my other 85ers, they pretty much don't get above 215. So, Trevin's a good size welterweight and a little bit undersized for middleweight, but I think he's capable of fighting at a high level in both.
What is your thoughts on weight cuts? And I mean, do you think that, I mean, what is it? One that has the weight cut, a rehydration stipulation where you can't go above a certain number. Do you think the UFC will ever get to that?
I don't. Right? They would have done it already. I'm not a fan of weight cuts. In my opinion, people would weigh in a couple hours before they fight, and they'd have to be within 5 pounds of each other. That way, if you're crazy enough to cut your weight, like, it's gonna it's going to have negative effects in the fight on your brain and your energy levels. So I'm not a fan of weight cuts, right? It's the most gruesome part of the sport. It takes a big toll on your body, takes fluid out of the brain. Who knows what it's doing to your hormones throughout those cuts, but it's also a nature of the beast. Like, you don't get into MMA trying to take care of your body and your brain, right? You know what you're signing up for. So it is what it is, and it's the nature of the game. But even at ONE FC, I've heard all these rumors that these guys at ONE FC, they have exceptions. Like, so-and-so has a hydration clause, but then you see them not going to these other people and checking theirs. Or you're not supposed to be in a sauna and cutting a lot of weight, but then you see some of their stars doing that throughout the week. So obviously there's favoritism there, and that's the problem. If you start doing that, but it's not fair across the board, and you make exceptions for your superstars, you're really screwing over the rest of the division.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's a very, very good point. I want to ask you a little bit about Miles Banks. Very, very big prospect. He's 3-2 now. What's his ceiling? How good can he be?
He can be phenomenal. Yeah, I'll tell you this: his skills are already really developed for a heavyweight, especially. Right, he moves like the basketball player that he was. He has great footwork and agility, and his size and power are insane. And he's very coachable as well. He's well rounded. He's won a lot of grappling competitions and stuff too. He's not just a striker. I think his biggest problem has just been the experience level, right? He just needs more experience, because sometimes he gets in the fight and he just goes and brawls, or he ties up with guys, or we'll be like, hey, keep your range, use your distance, and he'll get in the pocket and box with them and start grappling with them when it's a guy that he could have kept range and probably tore up on the feet. So he has all the skills in the world, and I think as time goes on, it's just, that IQ will continue to grow in the cage, and as it does, he's going to be a nightmare for people. Like, I would be very surprised if he doesn't end his career at a minimum in the rankings in the heavyweight division in the UFC. And I know that's crazy to say for someone that's 3-2, but I mean, if you watch this guy spar with people at the next level, even, I think anyone who's watched him spar these guys would also believe me. They would see what I'm saying.
I'm a big fan of Miles. He's just a great guy too. So I hope we
He
do
is.
really see him in the UFC one day. That
He's
would be
got
awesome.
personality too. When he gets in the big show and starts getting on these interviews, fans are gonna love him.
Yeah, I have no doubt that'll happen one day, I'm sure. Ugly Man Joe, Joseph Holmes, is he around anymore? Do you ever see him anymore?
I haven't seen him really since his last fight. He came one or two times, but I don't know if he's not fighting anymore and just moving on to the next chapter of his life, or if he's going to make that comeback. But no, I haven't seen him in a very long time. Another guy who was very physically talented, though, like great athleticism and size for 85. And, if he decided to come back and work hard, he definitely could.
Yeah. Well, I hope he comes back. I'm a big, obviously, I've become friendly with him over the years. So
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
love to see him back fighting at the highest
Yes.
of levels.
Super nice guy, too, man. Really nice guy.
Definitely. Antonio Figueiredo, 3-0 prospect. He fights February 7th for Fury FC. Can you tell me a little bit about him and his matchup?
I will, although his opponent already pulled on that one. So
Oh,
they're
no.
Fury was looking for a replacement. Doesn't look like it's happening in time for February. So hopefully for March we will. But yeah, 3-0, three first round finishes. At flyweight at that, he's cracking people. You don't see a lot of knockouts and TKOs like he's putting out there. He had KO of the year for Fury, and on our team, he had KO of the year, and he had the second runner up on the voting from our team roster too. Our fight team votes for submission of the year and KO of the year between all of our guys, and he got first and second with his head kick in that pool too. High ceiling for him, incredible talent. He's he's young and athletic and has a good head on his shoulders. A guy that went to school with an accounting degree, so I'm assuming when he gets to the show, he'll be smart and take care of his money the right way as well. But yeah, I think he's going to have an incredible future. And all we need, I would believe that all we would need is about 2 more wins, and he should be able to get on Contender Series later this year. And I'm excited for him, man. He has a bright future.
Anyone else at the gym that we haven't talked about that you expect to see in the UFC one day? Let's shine a light on some of your younger guys that maybe like the mainstream MMA public doesn't really know about yet.
Yeah, Bruce Whitehead, Bruce the Goose Whitehead. He's 5-1 at this time, 55er. We're doing a fight in March actually at 70. But he's incredible. He has, I believe, 3 or 4 fights that are under 30 seconds as a professional, and he's fighting really good, talented guys. I believe that with another win or maybe 2, that he'll be on Contenders this year. And then his girlfriend Mia Grawl, she's 2-0, 2 finishes as well. And I know for females that path to the show can be a little quicker, and I have no doubt with a couple of wins she could get there as well this year. Karan Reed, 4-2. very talented guy. He's a guy who just needs to stay active and continue to be in the cage. I think the rust and the injuries were a problem with him early in his professional career, but if you watch his last couple fights, he's looked phenomenal, and I think that'll continue to show in his next couple fights. He's booked in March. Borrego, hopefully we can get a few wins with him, and he'll be back on Contender Series. But the list goes on. I'm definitely pissed some people off and left some names out. Rain Guerrero, she has coming off a win off Pearl Gonzalez. And if you watch that fight, if you get a chance to watch her fight versus Pearl Gonzalez for XFC, incredible showing. I mean, a fan-friendly fight, anything that I believe anyone at the next level would want on their roster, like, is very exciting and bloody and gory. And she just went forward the entire time and really dominated someone who's really respected and a legend in the sport in Pearl Gonzalez. Like, Pearl's the dog and Pearl's talented. It's not an easy win. And she went into, Chicago or no, it was Detroit for XFC, a promotion that Pearl used to fight out of and was a champ for, I believe. And she went and took it to her and took that W. And I'm excited for Rain's future. She's booked in March for a regional title for XKO. And I'm assuming if she wins that, maybe we can get the call back for contenders or a late replacement call.
Nice. On average, on any day of the week, like how many people do you have on the mats? Like how much is the gym growing?
It's incredible, man. I think on average we're seeing 40 fighters on the roster or so. And this is from a few years ago when we started off at War, we had less than 10 fighters. Like Charlie Ontiveros, who's a UFC vet, came over there with me and a couple other pros regionally. And then we had a bunch of amateurs from day one. And, like Karan Reed was making his amateur debut then, and some of these other guys. And here we are, from 2017 to 2025, and we got a couple guys in the show and a bunch more really close. And we keep getting more and more coming. AJ Hodgkins is a big prospect. He just had his pro debut. He just had double knee surgery, but he should be back in this summer. And he's a guy that's started off in Oregon, then in El Paso, and now he's coming down to Houston. We just Willow Morton, another girl who should be going pro this year. She's just took bronze at Gamma Worlds. Her only loss there was Zoe Nowicki, who's no chump, and that was a decision loss. And she's got a bright future, and she's coming from Canada. We just getting a lot of transplants from all over the country, man. And I think it's people see what's going on. They make a visit here, and they see the quality of training partners and the coaching, and not to mention the attention they get. A lot of times they go to these other big gyms that have good training and good bodies, but they don't get the attention they need for the development. And we're big on development. I would say we have a good mixture between live and then drilling. And you go to a lot of gyms and it's a lot of live or it's a lot of drilling, and we're just trying to blend the two. And it's not like we do half of half. It's like we do double, Like when we went out to Vegas, I think I like the way Extreme did things. They do a lot of their live stuff and similar to the live positionals and the sparring that we do. And then I went to Syndicate and they had a lot of the drilling like we do. And their practices were very based on being technical and progression and development. And I feel like our practices are both of those combined. We're doing 2-3 hour practices and we're doing a little bit of both in those. And our motto is outwork everyone, and we're trying to do that. And I think the success of the guys regionally has been why we're doing so well, is why we're getting more of these guys, because the regional scene, Fury and some of these other organizations with the eyes on them, we're having success in those organizations, and people are seeing that and hearing the coaching, and it's just getting more and more transplants, which is funny because I never considered getting people moving from other places. It was always just about developing these guys from the ground up. But it's just a blessing. A lot of these guys come in here and they're already athletic and talented, and it's just, again, just trying to make them fight a little bit more like an MMA fighter.
It's very exciting. Is it Tomball, Texas? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Tomball, Texas, just a suburb of Houston, on the north side of Houston.
Okay. So for someone that lives in that general area and they're thinking about, trying out MMA and making a run at it, like what kind of prerequisites do they have to pass to come into your gym and join the team? Like what are the steps that someone would have to take to actually become part of your fight team?
Oh, become part of the fight team is different than join the gym, right? Anyone can join the gym, but our fight practices are invite only. And the reason is because we don't want a bunch of scrubs coming in that are slowing down the practice. Not to mention they'll either spaz and hurt someone trying to make up for the lack of technique compared to their partners, or they'll just be a waste of time. So we have within the team, within the gym, we do tryouts a couple times a year to see where their development's at. Me and the other coaches and a few of the pros come in, and we put them through some of the same training that we do with our other guys. And if I'm yelling 1-2 roll to a double leg and they don't know how to do a double leg properly or where to put their head or they don't know how to roll or then they're not ready. And it's just seeing where their knowledge is at and where their skill set's at. But we get guys that come in and they're super athletic and they have a background in wrestling or striking already, and those guys get fast tracked. Then we only have to develop part of their game and make a couple tweaks so those guys can get on the team a little bit quicker. But as I tell everyone, I get hit up from fighters in the last year all the time from other cities, and I tell them come make a visit because it's got to be a good fit on both ends, right?
Right.
You might come in and we might decide like, you're not worth putting our time into. Maybe, and to me that just means, do you have the work ethic? But they also might decide that, hey, I don't like the way they coach. I don't like their system. I don't like Houston, maybe, so that's something I think everyone should do before joining any team is, one, see success of the team. And then two, make a visit out there for a week or so at first, and coming for one day is not the same, right? It's a week-long thing. Our training is set up on certain days of the week. We do different things, and it's that way every single week. And I think anyone that's trying out a gym, whether it's ours or someone else's, should always go in for at least an entire week.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. This next question, it's not a joke. It might seem like a joke, but I'm just curious. Have you ever had anybody come in and say, "Hey, I want to train UFC"? Has that actually happened?
When I had my own gym, that does happen. At war, I'm sure that happens all the time. I don't deal with those people anymore, right? When I'm there, those people are not there. And I might have people come in, but usually I just give them a little information on the gym and tell them to talk to a manager or a salesperson. So thankfully, I don't have to deal with that end of it. All I have to deal with is the fight team. Jeremy owns the gym. He has to deal with more of that crap than I do. I'm glad I don't own a gym. I don't think I ever will again. I might have a big home facility one day, but I'm very happy to just work with fighters, and it allows me to develop them at a faster rate. So I don't have to deal with that BS.
Makes sense. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
So before I get you out of here, Coach, I wanted to ask just your thoughts on, I guess, the MMA Mount Rushmore or the GOAT and all that talk. You hear it all the time. Like right now, Islam, John Jones, people going back and forth. Who's the best pound for pound fighter in the world? What's your take on that right now? Who's the best pound for pound right now in the world? And if you had to put together a Mount Rushmore, who would be on it?
Right now, best pound for pound, you got to go with John Jones. I don't know how you can't, right? The guy's just been unbelievable. Obviously, Islam's looking great. I think Islam just needs to do it for a longer period of time for him to be in that same conversation as John Jones. And like him or hate him, right? John Jones personally has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but you can't deny his ability in the cage. He's got one of the best IQs in the sport. He's well-rounded. He has wrestling. He has jiu-jitsu. He has striking. He has everything, man. So I think he's the pound for pound greatest of all time.
Okay. And Mount Rushmore, obviously, you put John Jones in there, so you got to give me three more all time. Who would be those next three?
GSP for sure. Changed the game, right? Anderson Silva and Demetrius Johnson.
That's a pretty darn good foursome right there.
And if we put a female in there, I'd pick Valentina if we put a female in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Valentina at her peak, I feel like was maybe better than Nunez. It was close, but I thought she won.
Her fights with Nunez were arguably, she won, right? She lost the decision, but they were very competitive, and she's a weight class under. Incredible.
Right. Yeah, truly, truly. Do you think Tom Aspinall has a legit chance of beating John Jones?
Yeah, I do. Youth, right? He's got youth on his side, and that's always a factor. Father Time hits everyone. I don't know if it's hit John Jones yet. I think John Jones wins that fight, but Tom Aspinall is very quick. I got to see Miles and Tom Aspinall spar when we did a little trip out there to Vegas, and he's very technical, very well-rounded, and he's got speed. He's got a lot of speed at heavyweight.
Yeah.
So he has a chance. He definitely has a chance in that heavyweight. I guess everyone has a chance, If someone's going to beat John Jones, I would think it would be Tom Aspinall. Not to say I'm picking Tom Aspinall.
That's kind of what I'm thinking too, though. I feel like Aspinall is the guy that could get it done. And I love Stipe, but is it fair to say that Stipe just looked old in that fight? Did you think that?
Stipe is old, and he's had a lot of wars, that plays, and he had Russ coming into this fight too. So that also is another factor. Yeah, man, Stipe, I think it was his time to retire. I don't blame him for going to have one more fight on his way out and also collecting a big check at the same time. Good for him, but yeah, I'm glad he's retired, and hopefully he enjoys retirement with his family.
Yeah, well said, Coach. Great talking to you for the first time. We'll have to have you back again in the future and preview when you have like a time where you got a bunch of upcoming fighters that have big matchups. We'll get you back on and we'll break them all down. Is there anything that you want to plug or anything you want to talk about before we get out of here today?
Ah, that's it, man. Thanks for having me on. And like I said, hopefully this situation with Zach gets handled. I know that can be a timely process. In the past, it's taken 6 months to a year at times for us to win appeals. But hopefully that gets settled and that blemish on his record is taken away.